Now that, of course, was a piece not originally written for four-hand piano. It was an orchestral version that had been transcribed nicely for four-hand piano, as we will also hear at the end, Rhapsody in Blue, in a wonderful transcription. But the Fauré and the Beach were both written for that four-hand piano, and this was a very popular form, especially back in the late 19th, early 20th century, when there was no real recorded music, and everybody had a piano. And so the best way to sort of get music out there would be to write four-hand piano, which you can make a lot of noise, as you can hear, and also just give people a chance to perform together on a single piano. And so there's so much great four-hand music written for four-hand piano, and then arrangements of all the Beethoven and Mozart symphonies for four-hand piano, which is a really nice way to sort of hear this music outside the orchestral room. So this suite by Fauré is one of the most well-known four-hand pieces. It's known as the Dolly Suite. He wrote it between 1893 and 1896. So there are six little pieces. Each one of them was a gift to this girl named Dolly, and I'll explain the connection that he had to her. Fauré was actually born not that long after Bizet. Bizet, 1838, Fauré is born in 1845, so they were basically contemporaries. But whereas Bizet dies in 1875, Fauré lived all the way to 1924, the year Rhapsody in Blue was written. So he lived through a lot of changes in music, of course, lived through 20th century music, a lot of the crazy stuff happening. But he was a really forward-thinking composer. In fact, he took over the directorship of the Paris Conservatory in 1905, much to the chagrin of the old guard there, who didn't like the fact that he actually liked modern music, and they didn't think that belonged in the Paris Conservatory. So he really cleaned house there and helped some of the younger composers like Ravel get their start because he was there at the conservatory, and I think he would have liked some of where music was going. A lot of his music towards the end gets kind of dissonant and out there. Some people say he went deaf, and so maybe they thought he couldn't hear that music, but I think he was really just a very experimental sort. But this piece is very easy to love and great tunes. His married life was a little difficult. He was engaged for several years to a woman named Marianne Viardot. She was the daughter of a well-known composer and salon hostess named Pauline Viardot, who really was the center of a lot of Paris in the mid part of the 19th century. They were engaged for something like 5 years, and she kept putting off the wedding, saying, no, let's do it later, and then she ran off with somebody else. And so poor Fauré was kind of left behind. He ended up marrying Marie Frémier, who was the daughter of a sculptor. They had 2 sons together. The problem was she didn't like music, which is hard when you're married to a composer. So they really didn't get along all that well, and we know he had many affairs, and by the end of their lives, even though they stayed married, they only communicated via post, through letters. So one of the people we know that he had an affair with was a woman named Emma Bardock. She was a singer, and in fact, premiered a couple of Fauré songs, and would later premiere some Debussy songs. And they had an affair. She was married to a wealthy banker who didn't seem to care what was going on in her life. There was a child born around the time of the affair named Helene and nicknamed Dolly. And for many years, people thought that Dolly might have been Fauré's child. But most of the research now says the affair actually started after she was born. But he was very fond of her, very attached to this Dolly. And so he would write these little pieces as presents for Dolly. And they would not actually stay together. They would break up soon after. Interestingly, Bardock would later on have an affair with Claude Debussy and actually left her husband to marry Claude Debussy. And Debussy's wife at the time tried to kill herself in the Place de la Concorde and caused a huge scandal. So the love of the French always gets a little crazy, but there's a great deal of scandal. But Fauré, for his sake, wrote these pieces, and there are 6 of them, for occasions. So for Dolly's first birthday, he gave her the Berceuse, this lullaby that is, you might recognize. It's been used in a lot of movies as soundtrack, a very beautiful piece that actually Fauré had written about 20 years earlier under a different title, but he kind of changed things around and turned it into this lovely 4-hand lullaby for her first birthday. The second piece is called Meow, and you might think it's about a cat, but it has nothing to do with a cat. This was written for her second birthday, and interesting is she had an older brother named Raoul, and when she said his name, Monsieur Raoul, it came out as Miaou. And so this was a piece making fun of the fact that she couldn't say his name, and has nothing to do with a cat, but it's a very fun piece to play. The third one is, I think, the most beautiful of all, Le Jardin de Dolly. It's Dolly's garden. They had a beautiful garden in the back that she would play in. This was a New Year's Day present in 1895. And in fact, he quotes his own violin sonata, which was a beautiful piece in the middle of this. And it's just got some beautiful, beautiful soulful harmonies in that one. The fourth one is called the Kitty Valse. So again, you might think it's about a cat. It's not. It was actually misnamed. It's supposed to be called Ketty Valse with a K-E because Ketty was the family dog. So it is about a dog, but not about a cat. And so in this, I think you can sort of hear the dog whirling around, kind of chasing his tail, having fun. So that's really the Kitty Valse. The fifth one is another soft, slow one, tendresse, tenderness. This one is sort of the most harmonically inventive, and there's some really big shifts in harmonies that he does, but very beautiful. And then the last one, a very exciting a Spanish dance, Le Pas Espagnol, which supposedly was came about because they, on the mantelpiece at their home was a statue of a Spanish bullfighter and a bull, and he thought that was very fun, and so this has a little Spanish flair to it. And of course, there was a whole Spanish thing going on, like with Bizet's Carmen around this time. One last quote that I always love about Fauré, which is so true, I think, especially for those in the Asheville area struggling to deal with the devastation. He said once, "Art, and especially music, exists to elevate us as far as possible above everyday existence." So hopefully we can elevate ourselves, and certainly for those of you in Asheville, this is for you. This is the beautiful Dolly Suite by Gabriel Fauré. Welcome back, Elizabeth Borowski.